Sophia here from My Great Challenge. Welcome back to my channel and my new series Adventures in Sewing. This is episode 2 in which I'm going to make a lot of correction and start assembling the robe that I tried to put together yesterday. But first I need to thank everybody who has commented on the last video. You have been absolutely wonderful. I got a ton of advice from those of you who know how to sew. It's like having my mom next to me, and I really appreciate that. All good stuff. You've been all very generous in your advices and very kind and supportive and encouraging. I love you for that. You have no idea how much this makes me want to go on. So if you are new to sewing and you want to learn with me, by all means, please read all the comments in the videos that I make, because you're going to get a lot of information from the ladies out there and gents. I haven't seen any yet, but I'm sure there will be, who really know what they're doing, unlike us or me. And they are a wealth of information. They really are. And I am so grateful for you guys right now. So grateful. So without further ado, I am going to make a few corrections and tell you what I've learned so far. So I'm sitting right here next to my dummy mini-me robe, and I'm doing this because I want to show you a few things. Okay, let me put on my glasses because I've got so much info to share with you. Number one, we're going to talk about sizing. There is no way this is going to fit me. No way. I know that already, not by looking at it, but because you guys have told me that the size patterns that you see on those are the old size patterns. You know, 1950s, 1960s, let's face it, they had waist this big, okay? So they had a size pattern that was standard and universal throughout the world. So if you were going to buy a Burda pattern in Germany, the size pattern was pretty much the same that you would find here. It was universal, all right, throughout the whole universe of sewing. And then they invented something called vanity sizing in the pret-a-porter and the regular stores. So vanity sizing is basically, oh, you're size 12. Well, really, you're size 18. But we're not going to tell you that. You're a size 12. So we're used to wearing a specific size. Like I'm 12 in some tops, but 14 on others. It depends. I'm kind of like vacillating between. Believe it or not, I used to be an 8. But anyway, neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in another video. So the pret-a-porter and the ready-to-wear is vanity sizing, okay? So you can't go by the sizing that's on the package. If it says this is size B5 from 8 to 16, all right? This is not what you see at Kohl's, at Macy's, at Saks. This is not a size 14 you would see at Macy's, all right? You gotta go by your body measurements, which I haven't done yet. But I know I'm a 40, 42 in bust. So if I go here, it has body measurements right here on the top. Can you see it? All right. So if I go on the top here and I look at body measurements and I look for bust 42, according to this pattern, are you ready for this? I'm a 20W. I've been lied to my whole life. I'm told I'm a 14. I go to Kohl's, I buy a 14. I fit perfectly in it. It's a little loose sometimes depending on the cut. But according to patterns, I'm a 20W. Good luck finding patterns in those sizes. They're going to be very limited. So if you are wanting to sew, take your measurements and figure out what you can and cannot do. It's very obvious at this point that if I want a whole rest of my life, you know, my retirement sewing, I gotta seriously shed some pounds so I can fit in those patterns. This not gonna fit me, but we're gonna make it anyway, and maybe I'll gift it to somebody. I have admin at work who's like a second mom to me. Mary, I love you. She's probably gonna fit in that, so I'll give it to her if I don't fit in it. We never know. Okay, so that's number one. You gotta go through your body size measurement, not by the sizes they tell you on the package. So yeah, I don't think this is gonna fit me. Though it's a robe, it might be very forgiving. We don't know yet. We'll figure it out. I think the arms will fit. We'll see. But if I was doing the pants or the top, I would not fit in it. Okay, so that's good to know. Number two, flannel. I picked flannel fabric. Flannel shrinks. According to you guys, it shrinks by 6%. I have never worked with flannel before, so I wouldn't know that. I've never noticed that my quilting fabric was really shrinking after I washed a quilt. I never noticed any kind of, like, you know, whatever you call it, shrinking, I guess. But I guess those shrink only by 1 to 2%, so it's barely noticeable. But this, not only is it the wrong side, on top of that, it's gonna shrink. So what they say to do is wash your fabric and iron your fabric before you place the pattern on it and cut, all right? So I didn't do that. We need to do that moving forward. We're washing fabric and we are ironing it. I didn't iron either, but I'm gonna do that later on. I brought the ironing table. All right, one more thing that I've learned. When you cut your pattern, you saw how I was putting my fabric right side up, right? Well, it clearly states, and I say it clearly because the dogs are about to go out. Okay. Because I read this, but for some reason I missed that. All right, so you see how here it tells you wrong side, right side, and the legend for the colors on it, right? Okay, so the right side of the pattern or the right side of the fabric is the white, and then the darker side is the wrong side of the fabric. Well, if you look at the layout here and how they laid out the fabric and the patterns on top for cutting, it's clearly cut on the wrong side of the fabric. And the reason why they do that is that when you do your markings on your fabric, you're doing the markings on the back, not on the front of the fabric. So we've learned something here as well. All right, so I don't want to give you like a ton of things that I've learned because we want to sew, right? But read the comments. By all means, read the comments. You're going to learn. If you like me and you have a thirst for knowledge and you really, really, really want to succeed at sewing, read the comments. These ladies are gems. All right, they are. Now, final one, and that one is super important. Now, you remember yesterday I was talking about notches, right? In particular on the sleeves, I was like, oh look, there's 2 notches and then I have 1 notch and they kind of go together. That's not what it's for. It indicates left sleeve and right sleeve, and you're probably going to see that as well when you do pants. Now, for this particular pattern, I don't think it makes a difference because these are tube sleeves. They're not fitted, tailored, nice looking, poofy, kind of like, what you call it, tapered type sleeves. They're just basically big tubes, all right? But what it means is that when you do those notches, single notches match single notches and double notches match double notches. So if I look at this sleeve here, it has a double right here, focus, okay, you see it? A double notch here and then a single notch here. But this sleeve has the single notch in the front and the double notch in the back. So what I need to do, if I put my sleeve, which technically goes this way, if I go this way, I have the double notch in the front. No bueno, right? What I need to do is put this sleeve on this side and the other sleeve on this side. Okay, so that was great learning experience right there. I had no idea. That's the major correction I wanted to make. And And then the whole idea, you remember on the belt, there seemed to be like some kind of notches in the middle of it, and I said I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't get a lot of answers on that, but one of you has the idea that maybe this is where it's marking where the belt loop is going to have to go later on. Okay. So here goes. I've made the correction. I don't think it's really making any kind of difference, but come on, my arms are gonna fit in this, right? They got to fit in this. I think I'm gonna fit in this. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, if it doesn't fit, Mary, it's yours. All right, let's get started. So we're going to follow the steps one after the other. Step 1 is stitch the front 1 to back 2 at the shoulders. So the front one is the 2 pieces in the front, and the back is the one large that's in the back. So obviously I got to unpin everything, and we are going to iron those 3 pieces before we get sewing. So of course not all machines are going to be the same, but I gotta tell you, the Brother is super easy to wind. You just put your thread in here, and then you have a little notch here in the back. You have one here that you go in a little zigzag, and then all you have to do is put the bobbin right here. By virtue of moving this here on the Brother machine, the machine knows that it's winding a bobbin, so you don't have to move the knob like some Singer. You have to do that. This one you don't. So let me find my pedal, and there's a little notch right here. I don't know if you see that, but I'm putting the thread in the notch, and I'm holding the thread here. And what's going to happen when I hit the pedal, the bobbin's going to start turning, and this little notch here has a blade, and boom, and you just let it wind. And it will stop on its own, because this piece right here is the little rubber thing is an actual rubber stopper. So when the bobbin is full, it will stop on its own. So let's just wait for it to be done. And here we go. It stopped on its own. So what I have to do at this point is cut my thread, and I'm going to thread it in the machine. And put it in the needle. Now this machine is self-threading too, but I gotta be honest, on the Brother, I don't know if it's me or this machine or what, but half of the time it doesn't work. So I do it by hand. And then the bobbin goes with the thread going this way. And that is super easy, and it cuts on its own. Now I got a walking foot here. I gotta change this. Okay, so we're going to do the first shoulder, and I am right side to right side, and you see I have my 2 little notches here. They are matching. So what I'm going to do is just pin this. Now you could baste it if you wanted to. This is small enough a distance or length of fabric that I don't feel that I need to baste it. You could baste it by hand or use a large stitch length on your machine, like a 4. I think that's the one that goes the highest. I'm not sure on my machine. I'll have to check it out, because I'm going to baste stuff later on. But basically, this is it. You're going to pin those, and we're doing a 5/8 of an inch seam. So it's going to go all the way along the side here. And this side here is the one that is going to follow my line right here at the 5/8. So first I got to pin, and I'm only pinning because I don't want it to shift when I'm doing this. Again, if you really wanted to be super thorough, you would baste, but I'm not on this because it's really not a a large piece. When I'm doing the sides, and definitely when I'm doing the sleeves, I will be basting. Okay, so I just got 3 pins. And that will be enough. So I want to make sure that everything is lined up properly. I have corner to corner here, my 2 notches facing each other, we're good to go. So what setting do I have? On my brother, if I put the height at 4, it brings my needle right there to the middle. Do you see it? Let's say I move it to the left. I'm going to go at 3.5. You see it move? 3, 2, 2.5, 1.5, 1, and 0.5. And then if I move it to the right, right? So I'm just gonna leave it at standard right there, whoops, in the middle. What I'm gonna do is bring it down, because what I wanna do is measure from here to here and make sure it's 5/8. And it's a good thing that I checked with this little gizmo here, because if I put this on the edges of my blue tape where the 5/8 is, I have to move my needle. Now, I'm one of those people who likes to have my needle in the middle. So I'm going to move the tape instead. How about that? I'll get a different marking. And for me, when I go like this and I measure, the 5/8 is right here on number 2. That's if I put the needle in the middle, which I prefer. I don't know why, I just do. So when I sew, I'm following this line. So I bring my piece right here. I'm laying everything flat. And I'm putting it right here against the blue. And you've noticed that all my pins are facing with the head towards me. And the reason why I'm doing this is as I go along and I remove the pins, it's easier to remove them this way because the head is towards me. If the head was the other way, I would have to try to like figure it out. It'd be all complicated. So the first thing I'm gonna do is a couple of stitches forward, and then I'm gonna do some stitches backward to lock the stitch in place. So I'm starting a little bit here, put my needle down, let's do a couple of stitches forward, and I'm going to do a couple of stitches backward, and that's locking my stitch in place, and off we go. When I'm at the end of the fabric, I'm going to do a couple of stitches backward and forward. Lift the foot, and that's done. Now, just because this is the first piece, I'm going to double measure to make sure I have 5/8 throughout, okay? Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. Okay, so the setting is good. Let's look at it. So here's the piece that I just assembled. All right, my stitch length is 2.5, by the way. I didn't tell you that. And then from the right side, this is what it looks like. And so now, how do I press this? Do I press this towards the back of my shoulder in the front, or do I press it open like this? Let's find out. And this one, because it's the shoulder, is pressed open like this, and it makes sense because if I was moving it one way or another, it would create bulk on the shoulder, right? You want it to be as smooth as possible. Now, do I need to zigzag the edges? If I did, I would have probably done that first, right? I'm not going to do that for interest of time, But basically, if you have fabric that frays a lot, this one doesn't fray too much. I'm looking at it, it really doesn't too much. You would do a zigzag all along the edges. When I do another garment, I'll probably do that. But if you want to take the time to do that, this one is just basically my fooling around and learning. So, yep, that's done. And this is what it looks like when it's pressed. So that gives you an idea of how the fabric with the directions is going to change when you're cutting your pattern in the grain. And if it was solid, it wouldn't make any difference. But it makes you appreciate when you buy high-end clothes and you see that the lines actually meet, or they did some kind of design with it. It's absolutely amazing to me how they put that stuff together. But anyway, this is a nice one. That fabric's got a little bit of a stretch though, so we're definitely gonna have to do a stay stitch around the neckline, and I'll show you that in a minute. But let me do the second one. I'll be right back. So here's step 2, and step 2 is stay stitching the neck edges of the robe above the notches, okay? You remember how I just said that the fabric had a little bit of a stretch? A stay stitch is basically an additional stitch that you do within a curve to hold the curve together. Otherwise, it's going to stretch and lose its shape, basically. So let me show you how to do that. So last night, I was watching videos on sewing, and I learned about stay stitch. And you know, sometimes you have a garment, and you buy something, and it's just constantly like going this way. It's like it has no shape, all right? And flimsy fabric will do that a lot, but it's basically because the color didn't get any stay stitched done on it. So the fabric kind of like pull one way or pull another way depending on how you move, and at the end of the day it's totally lost its shape and you have this gaping thing in the front, right? I'm sure that wasn't the best face I could possibly come up with. So anyway, so stay stitching is very practical when you have a collar or a sleeve. So this is the curve right here of the back, and I've done the 2 shoulders, you can see that, right? And they want you to stay stitch from notches all the way to the other side. So I have a notch right here on the collar, and there's another matching notch right here on the collar. So what I'm going to do is from the right side of the fabric, at 1/4 of an inch from where the seam allowance would be, I am going to do a stay stitch, which is basically a regular straight, I'm sorry about the clock, a regular straight stitch, but a little bit tighter than what I'm usually doing. So here I've been doing 2.5 in length. I'm going to bring it down to 2. It's going to be a little bit tighter, and it's going to hold the fabric together. It's basically a reinforcement is what I'm trying to tell you. Is the seam allowance, and we're gonna do 1/2 inch. Okay, so that means that I have to move my needle this time around. So I'm gonna move it to 6, and that's gonna give me, we're gonna make sure, 1/2 inch. Let's go and use the little thing here. Perfect. No. 7. I gotta move it to 7. I figured I might as well show you. So before, my needle was right in the middle, right? And from the needle at the middle, right here, to the blue line, it was 5/8. But I need to do my stay stitch 1/4 of an inch away from where the seam would be. And the seam would be at 5/8, right? So I gotta reduce that. So I move my needle up to the right, and now when I measure from the edges to the needle, I'm exactly at 1/2 of an inch, and that's what I'm going to use for measurement. And according to the direction, they want you to do that on the right side of the fabric. Okay, so I'm moving the fabric on the right side, pulling my thread here towards the back. I'm going to hold it when I do that, and they want you to start at the notch. Do you see my little notch right here? Okay, so I'm going to start at the notch. I'm going to place this right here, bring my foot down, And all I have to do is follow the edges here, right? And same thing, I'm going to, let me hold my thread a little bit, go down. I'm going to do a couple of stitches forward and backward. Okay, so that was forward, here's backward. Okay, and follow the line. So here's the neck, well, at least the back of it, and you see how it's got much less of a stretch. It's because I held it. Now, because I cut this on the bias, you see that's a curve right here. The fabric is fraying a little bit, so for the back of the neck where I have the curve, I am going to do a zigzag on it just to hold the fabric together. And by thread, I mean the fabric thread. So let me find my neck here, and I'm going to start a little bit before the seam from the shoulder, right? Just put my needle down and off we go. Let me tell you, it is not easy to film sewing. Anyway, so I'm doing a zigzag where the fabric is fraying. You see that? Because that's cut on the bias, which means diagonal. Okay, so to review, in the neck, we did a stay stitch right here, and now I just did a zigzag. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the zigzag right here? All right, so now I really have what they call a stay stitch, because I have the stay stitch right here at the bottom that's holding the curve together, and the zigzag is holding the curve together too. So now if I go like this, you see it's really not stretching anymore. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let me move forward with the next step. Whew, I'm sweating it. how am I doing so far? All right, that was easy. So far, that was easy. I don't have any problem with this. So to save ourselves from lots of cursing, I placed and did the first sleeve. And I can't say it was difficult, but you have to think because it's not that clear in the instructions. So I'm going to show you the sleeve. And the first one, which is the left sleeve, is done. And I didn't do too bad at all. So let me show you what I did here. And we'll go in detail when I do the sleeve, the left one, not the right one. Okay, so the first thing is when we cut the pattern, there was a big dot that needed to be marked. And you can still see it here. That dot is supposed to go right here on the seam. I'm a little off, not by much, that's okay. All right, then they want you to assemble the beginning of the curve here. And the thing is, of course, the curve itself needs to be gathered. They don't tell you that. I'll show you how I did this. I gathered it into two parts to make kind of like a little bit of a shoulder design, whatever you want to call it. Here it's not too bad. Look, I didn't pucker too much. It's the first time I do a sleeve. I didn't do too bad. I meant too bad, not too much. And then in the back here, it's not puckering too much either. All right, and once you've done this part here, they want you to assemble the sides and the bottom part of the sleeve in one continuous seam. Now, you see I'm off by a little bit too, so we're going to try to do better on the next one. But it's not that bad, okay? For first time, I'm pretty impressed that I was able to do it. Once you have that continuous seam from the edge of the sleeve whoop, all the way down the bottom, then you add this. You do this part here, the bottom part, which was not that easy because they don't tell you what to do with this part here. They just don't tell you. So I had to figure it out that those two here, the seam from the side and the inside of the sleeve, needed to be flattened and edges to edges, not overlapping or anything. But that's the inside of the sleeve number 1. So I'm going to do the second sleeve and show you how to do it, and that'll be the end of this video. And then in the next one, we'll do the collar and the sleeve edges, and I guess we'll do the belt. I'm pretty happy with this. I did this, guys. It's my first sleeve. Yay! So let's do the last sleeve. First things first, I got to unpin the band, because we're not doing that yet. And I think the sleeves was going to be the most difficult for this particular robe, because again, never done it before. So I am right side down, right? The good side of the fabric is this way, so the wrong side is up facing me. And what you need to do is open your sleeve, and you're going to put it face down as well. And we're going to locate the little dot that was the circle that was on the edges. You see my little dot right here? Okay. And that little dot needs to match the seam right here. So you're putting the dot right on the seam, and for some reason the other one moved, so I want to make a mistake. And the edges of the fabric are against each other like this. Alright, so I want to make sure the dot is right on the seam. And I'm going to pin it. And you got to make sure, if you're going to pin it, you want to pin this flat open, okay? Because otherwise you're going to sew on it and fold it. You don't want that. Okay, so that's done. Then what they want you to do is pin the whole curve. So what I did was take the part where I have the two little notches, I don't know if you see that, and then I'm matching it with the two notches that are on this side. I'm putting them together right here. So I have the two notches matching, and I'm going to pin that. So this here has to be pinned together. And I'm doing the same thing on the other side. On the other side, I'm matching. Remember, single to single, double to double, right? We learned that from yesterday's video. Match those here. Pin this. All right. But now I'm faced with this and this having to match, and they're not, because there's more fabric on the sleeve than there is on the armhole. And there's two ways of doing it. I can either put a thread, like a basting thread, through this sleeve and then pull the thread and gather the fabric together. It would basically do something like this, right? It would reduce the fabric in terms of length, and then you have to kind of like put all those little folds equal. I don't really know how to do that, so what I did is that on both sides at about the same distance from the pin that's in the middle, I made a little fold up until making sure that the fabric here was the same. You can't see, right? So I don't have any puckering or anything. So at that little fold here, I'm putting a pin. And that's what's giving me that little shoulder design. I don't know how you call it. I made that up. Okay, so I have one here, and then the other one is just about here. And you want to make sure you fold it the same way. All right, so the fold is this way. First, I want to get this, make sure it's the same. And here. There we go. All right. And they are about the same. I don't know if you see that. Okay. Oh boy. I hope I'm explaining properly what I'm doing here. It may not even be the right way to do it, but that's how I figured out to do it. Okay. Now that I have this, what I'm going to do is baste. I'm not machine basting. I'm basting by hand. And what I'm going to do now is basically a stitch that's from here to here, the whole curve, at 5/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to do a stay stitch at 1/4 from that. So that's going to give me a little bit more strength on that particular curve. So you go from one side to the other, and you go very slow because we're in a curve. Talking like I know what I'm saying, but anyway, you go very slow because we're in a curve. I'm putting myself at 5/8, so I'm right there on my little blue tape. And make sure, so let me reduce the speed. Okay, needle down, and we're going to do a few stitch forward, few stitch backward to lock it in place. Okay. And I'm going really, really slow because I want to follow the curve. Now, the only problem with this is that I'm putting my hand underneath, not to pull any fabric, but to make sure that the fabric from the front of the robe here is not folded underneath, because otherwise I'll be catching it as well. So you want to make sure everything is nice and flat. You don't pull it one way or another, and you just let it go. So now I don't need the basting stitch anymore, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and remove it. And now I'm doing a stay stitch. So I'm going right back to the beginning. And 1/4 of an inch from the seam that I just created, I'm going to do another straight, and for me it's moving my needle to 7. And we're going to do the same thing, and what it does again is that it gives it strength and it stops it from losing its shape. Okay, so here we go. That's what I just did. The shoulder right here, this one, I can see my little black dot right here. So I got this one really, really good. I don't have any puckering. I have that little fold thing that I created. Let me show you in a better way. Okay, so here is the shoulder and the top of the sleeve. So now what they want you to do, I'm not sure why, other than eliminating bulk, is that they want you to cut most of what's above this double line you just created. Let's see, I'm cutting. And they don't want you to do that for the rest of the sleeve, but just for here. And I think it's just to give less bulk on the shoulder. And what I do is that I just go in a curve like this. So you see what I did? This is the full length here, and then I cut a big part of it here. So now we need to flatten this towards the sleeve. So I'm going to go on my iron, and this is going to get flattened and pressed this way. That's the sleeve. Where's the sleeve? Oh, no, the other way around. Here's the sleeve on this side. So the seam is going to go get pressed this way. So here's the seam here. At the shoulder, it gets pressed away from the neck towards the sleeve. Next, so seam is going towards the sleeve. Now, what we're going to do is assemble the sides. So you put it right side against right side. Here's the side. You gotta remember you have your notches here, double notch to double notch. Okay. Don't really need to pin this. I'm just gonna go ahead and baste it directly. If I find my needle, here we go. And this is the part where they didn't really explain very well what you were supposed to do. So I'm going to tell you now. Okay, so you're supposed to pin and baste the side here, and then you take your sleeve and you're supposed to do the side, the length like this of your sleeve as well. So that leaves you with the sleeve here and the sides being done. And then they need to be put together and stitched in a continuous seam, meaning from the end of the sleeve here where the cuff is going to be all the way to the bottom of the robe, which makes sense. All right, and that would leave you with a hole right there, and that's the hole that we need to finish off. But what they didn't say is whether this needed to overlap or not. And I figured that it doesn't. You just put it together like this, and you're basically going to do a one seam continuous from one end to the other, leaving no gap in between, but it cannot overlap either. All right, because what happens is that when we finish the sleeve, that will create a seam that we'll have to open up and work with, but we're not there yet. So let me first baste the sides, and I'm going to baste the side of the sleeve as well. So I'll be right back. And I'm almost getting to the point where I'm leaving the sleeve and getting to the side. So I'll show you how I do this. So here, I just try to put the fabrics against each other like this. I don't know if you can tell. Again, no overlap, no gap, one continuous seam. And I caught it. Good. So now I left the sleeve and I'm on the side of the gown. Right, so this is the part I wasn't really understanding earlier, right? So here's the sleeve, and then you see we have the continuous seam here that goes into the sides of the gown, okay? And then that hole right here is the underarm of the sleeve, and we're going to finish this off now. So this is the part where I kind of had to figure out what they were talking about, because the pattern really was not clear, and that happens. You know, sometimes it just, you know, if you know how to sew, you kind of know what's going to happen. You can anticipate the next step, but when you don't, like me, it's kind of like, what is going on? Okay, so this part here at the bottom is the sides of the gown, okay, on your hip, basically, all the way up to your armpit that goes here. And then this side here is the underside of the sleeve. Right, so what we're gonna do is basically join them. But what do you do with those two seams? Now you remember the continuous seam that we did? Okay, so what you gotta do is open it, and then you put it right side to right side like this. So you're basically doing a sandwich. All right, so we have the sleeve here, we have the bottom of the or the sides of the gown here, and then we have the two seams. And what I did was basically put them together like this. So you see I have 1, 2 here, that's the seam, and then the two sides here. And what I did was just go ahead and stitch that together just to hold them in place. Okay, and then I'm doing that along here, and I'm doing the same thing on the other side. I'm taking one side, the bottom of the sleeve, flatten the seams open, put them together like this, and what it does is that it's going to give me a continuous seam from the inside of the sleeve all the way to the bottom. Then all I have to do after that is just press it. And I believe you press it downwards, not towards the sleeve, if that makes sense. Now what do we do? Well, we just put the rest of the sleeve together. So I'm just going to go ahead and match my notches. You see my 2 notches here? So I'm going to match those guys here. I'm going to try to not have too much pucker, so I'm going to be a little bit off, and that's all right because I don't want any pucker. All right, and then baste the rest of the sleeve, and that's all the part that goes in the armpit here. And then I do pretty much the exact same thing on the other side of the armpit. I'm basting along the edges. And at this point, I'm joining or meeting with my basting thread. I'm meeting the one that I did earlier where we did the double stitch and we had to cut off a little bit. So what you got to do now is basically copy those 2 stitches that we did earlier, the one that's at 8 the one that's at 5/8 of an inch from the edges, and the one that's at 1/4, the stay stitch. You redo those 2 and you copy that all along here, and you even go over the original ones. I'm not sure why they want you to do that other than strength, but you basically do 2 concentric circles over everything that you've done before, and then here you make sure you leave this open, and when you're sewing with your machine you make sure you leave that one open too. Okay, let's go do it. You'll know what I'm talking about. So this part is a little bit tricky. It's not difficult, it's just a pain to maneuver. So Easiest way to do it is to go back to where we were before when we already did the 2 stitches, right? The stray stitch and the regular one. So I'm going to reposition myself exactly on it. Do a couple of stitch forward and backward. Okay. Where it is tricky is that we're working in a circle basically, but we got to make sure that all of the fabric from the sleeve, you see how I'm pushing fabric out of the way, is really away from the needle, because this is how you catch stuff, and you're gonna get like puckers and you got to pull up the seam ripper. We don't want that. All right, here we go. Stitch forward, backward, and off we go. So again, I don't know if I got this right, but basically this is the seam for the sleeve, which I ironed open, and then when you get to the body of the robe, this is what you get. This is how I did it, and you can see here that I have the 2 lines of stitching. Right, so this, I guess maybe I could leave it open, but I think you're better off flattening it and ironing it towards the size of the body, so that way your armpit rests on this part here and you don't have this thing poking inside of your armpit. So let me iron the whole thing, put it on the dress form, and then we'll give it a final look. So here we go, I made sleeves. So here's the first one I did that I showed you earlier, with a tiny bit of pucker right here, and then at the armpit I was off by less than 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and then here's the one I just made and demonstrated. So here is that little, we're going to call it a souffle, whatever you want to call it, that I did right here. And then here's the front with barely any puckering. That's gonna go away once it's ironed. Let's look at the back. It's looking pretty good. And let's look at this here. Let's investigate. I'm off by a tiny bit again, so it's not perfect, but I would say that for a first timer putting sleeves, I did pretty good. What do you think? I think I did pretty good. So to recap for today, what did we do? We assembled the shoulder here. We did the stay stitch on the collar here to give it more strength and so that the fabric doesn't stretch. And we assembled 2 sleeves and the sides. And I think this was the hardest part for the whole project. Well, at least to me, because never done that before. So I'm pretty impressed with myself. I made sleeves. Now I have fantasy and grandiose ideation that I'm going to make a smoking jacket for Edward when he goes to college, right? You remember satin, or maybe like velvet and like all sorts of, you know, like nice dragon pattern on it. That'd be cool. But then I'll have to learn to work with satin. So I don't know, maybe I'll just do it in velvet. But yeah, I made this. Comment down below, give me my corrections, and add on comments to let me know what I did wrong, what I did well. Well, no, don't tell me what I did well. Tell me what I did wrong. I want to hear where I'm not doing good. What could I've done better, and techniques that you've learned. You know, I was trying to do the arm on the arm part of the machine, but I think it's really just for the cuffs that you do that, because I couldn't figure out how to insert it, and it was just, you know, I didn't want to curse. But anyway, so yeah, I still don't think I'm fitting in it. We'll find out when I finish it. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you like this video and this series. I will see you later. Thanks for watching, you guys. Bye.